The vast halls of the Galactic Council chamber were silent, save for the low hum of the advanced technology surrounding the room. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the human delegation standing at the center. The moment had finally arrived. The fate of humanity's future in the galaxy would be decided today. Captain Sarah Thompson, leader of the human delegation, stood tall. She was calm, but her heart raced. She had prepared for this moment for months, but nothing could fully prepare her for the eyes of the galaxy upon her. Beside her were her trusted aides, their faces tense with anticipation. The atmosphere was thick with pressure, each species wondering what the humans would do. Peace talks had been arranged after years of conflict, and all eyes were now on Earth. The leaders of the Xarnith, a towering and fierce insectoid race, sat to Sarah's left. They exchanged glances, their mandibles clicking in annoyance. The Drakari, a race of highly intelligent and cold-hearted warriors, sat to her right, their glowing blue eyes studying the humans with suspicion. The Galactic Council's goal was simple: bring peace to the galaxy. But the talks had stalled at every turn. The human representatives had been forced into a corner: either accept the terms of the Council or risk further war with the powerful alien species. "I call this session to order," the Council leader, a tall, silver-skinned being named Thalrex, said in a calm but commanding voice. His eyes swept across the room before settling on Sarah and her team. "We gather today to determine whether humanity will join the Council or continue its reckless path of isolation." The words struck like a blow, though Sarah didn't show it. She knew that the Council saw humanity as nothing more than a nuisance. They were too young, too unrefined, and far too unpredictable. Some of the species present had been around for thousands of years, while humans had only just begun their journey into space. Thalrex continued, his voice taking on a more measured tone. "Your planet's aggressive actions in the past have led to widespread suffering. The Xarnith and the Drakari are among those who have suffered because of your race's inability to understand the importance of peace. Will you join us in our efforts to ensure that the galaxy remains safe for all species?" The Council leader's words were heavy with judgment, and the room fell silent. Sarah could feel the weight of their expectations bearing down on her. They were demanding humanity's submission, their compliance, their trust. But she knew that humanity could not bend to their will, not anymore. Sarah took a deep breath and stood tall. Her voice was firm as she spoke, cutting through the tension in the room. "We will not submit to anyone. Humanity will not surrender our autonomy. We have tried to negotiate peace, but your terms are nothing more than a way to control us. You speak of peace, but what you really want is power." The room stirred with murmurs of surprise. Sarah could see the shock in the faces of the Council members. For a moment, there was silence, then a ripple of anger. The Xarnith leader, General Varnak, stood up, his eyes glowing with fury. "You dare insult the Council, and all that we have done to keep order in this galaxy," Varnak hissed. His antennae twitched in agitation. "You humans are nothing but children playing at war. Your species has no place here if you refuse to follow the rules." Sarah stood her ground. "We've heard your rules, and we've seen your so-called peace. But peace at the cost of our freedom is not peace. It is subjugation. Humanity will never bow to anyone." The tension in the room reached a boiling point. The Drakari leader, a stoic being named Eularis, leaned forward, his glowing eyes narrowing. "This is your last chance, Captain Thompson," he said coldly. "Agree to the Council's terms or face the consequences. You will not survive another war." Sarah's gaze never wavered. "You underestimate us, Eularis. If you think humanity will just fall in line like all the other species you've controlled, you are gravely mistaken." She turned to the delegation behind her. They had all heard her words, but now they were waiting for her to make the final call. They had prepared for this moment, for the possibility that the talks might break down. It was a gamble, but it was the only choice they had. With a nod to her team, Sarah stepped away from the negotiation table. "We will not be part of your council," she declared. "Humanity is not your subject. We stand on our own." The room erupted in outrage. The Xarnath and Drakari leaders stood, their voices raised in anger. "You have just sealed your fate," Varnak spat. Thalrex, visibly angered by the human refusal, rose from his seat. "Very well, Captain Thompson. If this is your choice, then know this. The Galactic Council will not tolerate your insubordination. You will be treated as enemies from this moment forward." As Sarah and her team turned to leave the room, the weight of their decision hit her like a tidal wave. She had rejected the chance for peace, a chance to unite humanity with the galaxy. The Council would now consider Earth an enemy. There would be no turning back. Once outside the Council chambers, Sarah's aide, Lieutenant Kara, spoke in a low voice. "Captain, what have we done?" Sarah turned to face her. "We've just made humanity stand clear. We won't be controlled by anyone, not the Xarnath, not the Drakari, and certainly not the Galactic Council. Now we fight for what's ours." And with that, the crew of the human warship set their course back to Earth, fully aware that the galaxy had just changed. Peace was no longer an option, and war was inevitable. But one thing was certain: humanity was no longer going to beg for a place in the stars. The tension in the galaxy was palpable. The sudden and unexpected rejection of the Galactic Council's terms had set off a chain of reactions that no one could have anticipated. The human delegation's bold decision to walk away from peace talks had left the Council furious, but it had also sparked a new sense of purpose in humanity. No longer would they be pushed around. No longer would they be considered the weak link in the galaxy. Back on Earth, the situation was grim. The leaders of the world watched with a mixture of fear and determination as the news of the failed peace talks spread like wildfire. The global media was ablaze with reports of the fallout, and rumors of alien fleets gathering in the outer regions of human space began to circulate. At Earth's command center, Sarah Thompson stood before a holographic map of the solar system. The human warship, Resolute, was the only thing standing between Earth and whatever the Council decided to throw at them next. "Captain, we've received reports from the outer colonies. The Xarnath are mobilizing their fleets. They're preparing for an all-out assault," said Lieutenant Kara, her voice steady but tinged with worry. Sarah looked over at Kara, her eyes unwavering. "They think we're weak. They think they can crush us, but they haven't seen what we're capable of." The crew of Resolute had trained for moments like this. They knew that war was no longer a distant possibility. It was a looming certainty. And in that certainty, humanity's true strength would shine. What the Council didn't know was that the humans had something they hadn't counted on: technology that could turn the tide of any battle, and a willingness to fight to the bitter end. Across the galaxy, in the heart of the Galactic Council, there was chaos. The Xarnath, furious at the humans' refusal, had already begun to form a coalition with the Drakari, the most formidable of their allies. Together, these two species could easily overwhelm Earth's defenses, yet they were still uncertain. They knew the humans had technology unlike anything they had ever seen, and that gave them pause. "What do we do now, Thalrex?" General Varnak of the Xarnath asked, his voice dripping with anger. "The humans have just declared war. They refuse our terms, and they think they can stand against us." Thalrex, the council leader, sighed deeply. His silver skin glowed faintly under the soft light of the chamber. "We cannot underestimate them. We have seen what they are capable of when cornered. They may be a young species, but they are resourceful, and their technology. Their weapons are more advanced than we expected. But they are isolated," Thalrex, Ulurus of the Drakari said. "They have no allies in this fight. The Council will stand with us, and we will crush them before they even have a chance to strike." Thalrex paused, his thoughts heavy. The Galactic Council was the ultimate authority in the galaxy, but it was also a collection of different species with their own agendas. If they pushed humanity too far, they risked losing control of the galaxy. The human warship, Resolute, had become a symbol of defiance. It had proven itself capable of more than just survival. It had shown that humanity could fight back, and that alone was enough to make the Council uneasy. "Prepare the fleets," Thalrex finally said, his voice cold. "We will make them regret their decision, but we must do so with caution. If we strike too hard, we risk provoking the rest of the galaxy. Humanity will pay for their insolence, but we will not destroy them. Not yet." Back on Earth, the Resolute was preparing for its first real test. Captain Sarah Thompson stood at the bridge, watching as the crew made final preparations for what was coming. She had spent years training for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare her for the weight of what they were about to face. The aftermath of the battle was nothing short of a miracle. The Xarneth fleet had been decimated. The Resolute, against all odds, had held its ground, and the crew's bravery had turned the tide of what many had thought would be an impossible war. The victory, however, was bittersweet. Although Earth had proven its strength, the rest of the galaxy had been watching. The consequences of such an act of defiance could be far-reaching. Back on Earth, the atmosphere was heavy with uncertainty. The global leaders had convened, and the air was thick with tension. No one had expected humanity to stand against the mighty Xarneth, let alone emerge victorious. Yet now, humanity had drawn the attention of every species in the galaxy. Some were intrigued, others were terrified, and many were preparing for the inevitable retaliation. Captain Sarah Thompson stood at the head of a new command center, a temporary facility set up in the heart of Earth's capital. The victory over the Xarneth was a massive boon, but it had come at a cost. The galaxy was no longer just a distant entity. Now, it was personal. "Captain, the news is spreading," Lieutenant Kara said, her voice heavy with concern as she entered the command center. "Reports from across the colony suggest that some species are rallying to our side, while others are preparing for war. The Drakari and the remaining Xarneth forces are organizing a counterattack." Sarah's eyes flicked over the holographic displays, tracking the movements of the remaining alien fleets. The Resolute had done its job, but they couldn't rely on one ship forever. Earth's forces were still limited, and the power of the galaxy's other fleets dwarfed their own. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," Sarah replied, her voice calm despite the weight of the situation. "Our victory is just the first step, but we have to be ready. This isn't just about defending Earth anymore. It's about showing the galaxy that we will not back down." The stakes were rising with every passing hour. News reports from across the galaxy confirmed what Sarah and her team had already feared. Humanity was now an enemy to many powerful forces. The Galactic Council, humiliated by their failure to subjugate Earth, was determined to ensure that humanity would never rise to challenge their authority again. At the heart of the Council, Thalrex watched Earth's rising power with growing frustration. The defeat of the Xarneth had been a blow to his credibility, and the defiance of humanity had shattered the delicate balance of power he had worked so hard to maintain. The Drakari, once an uneasy ally, were now a threat. They had long been eager to dominate, and their thirst for control had only been stoked by the human rebellion. Thalrex sat at the head of the council, surrounded by representatives from dozens of species, all of whom were whispering among themselves. "How did this happen?" General Varnak demanded, his voice raw with anger. "The humans shouldn't have been able to defeat us. They should have cowered before us. What have we missed?" Ulurus of the Drakari leaned forward, his cold blue eyes fixed on Thalrex. "The humans have something we underestimated, a relentless drive to survive, and a technology that rivals our own. They will not back down. It's time we end this, once and for all." Thalrex closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the enormity of the situation. The humans had awakened something within him, a fear he had never thought possible. They had been underestimated, dismissed as an insignificant race, and now they were forcing the council into a corner. "We cannot let them remain a threat," Thalrex said, his voice quiet but firm. "We will do whatever it takes to crush them. Prepare the fleets. We will launch a coordinated strike on Earth." Back on Earth, Sarah stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching as the warship glided through space toward the outer rim of their system. The Resolute was humanity's flagship, the symbol of their defiance, and its crew was ready for whatever the galaxy threw at them. But Sarah knew that Earth was still vastly unprepared for the might of the galaxy's united forces. "Captain, we've just received word from the colonies," Lieutenant Kara said, her voice laced with urgency. "The Drakari and the remnants of the Xarnath fleet are on the move. They're heading straight for Earth. They're organizing a full-scale invasion." "How long until they arrive?" Sarah asked, already bracing herself for the worst. "At current speed, they'll reach Earth in 3 days." The battle was far from over, but for the first time, humanity was making a statement. Against the overwhelming power of the Drakari and the Xarnath, Earth's forces were holding their ground. The Resolute and its fleet had fought valiantly, but the enemy armada was relentless, pressing in from every side. Despite humanity's best efforts, they were quickly realizing the limits of their strength. Captain Sarah Thompson stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the unfolding chaos. The enemy's firepower was overwhelming, and their ships were equipped with advanced weapons that Earth's forces had never encountered before. But humanity had something the galaxy's mightiest species had failed to understand: resilience. "Captain," Lieutenant Kara said, breaking Sarah's focus, "the enemy is pushing us back. We've lost 2 of our ships already, and the fleet is scattered. What are your orders?" Sarah glanced around the bridge. Her crew, though battered, was still determined. There was no turning back now. She knew they couldn't win this battle alone, but there was one thing they could do: call for help. "We need to make contact with the colonies," she said, her voice calm but determined. "Earth's strength isn't just in this fleet. It's in our unity. We need to rally every human ship we can, and we need to convince the other species we've been at odds with that now is the time for alliances. If we're going to win, we need them on our side." Kara hesitated for a moment. "But Captain, we've been enemies with most of these species for decades. How can we possibly expect them to help us now?" "We don't have a choice," Sarah replied. "The galaxy is changing, and humanity has just shown its strength. If we stand alone, we will be crushed. But if we unite with others who want to see the Council fall, we might just stand a chance." Sarah's decision was not an easy one. The idea of trusting former enemies was anathema to everything humanity had been taught about survival in space. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The Council was a threat to all, and humanity was no longer going to be their scapegoat. Sarah knew she had to take the first step. As the Resolute limped back to the safety of Earth's outer orbit, Sarah gave the order to send out distress signals to every known ally, even those they had fought in the past. There were the Nyarlath, a race of mercenaries who had long contested humanity's territorial claims in space. The Qurashi, a technologically advanced but neutral species who had long been rumored to have interests that aligned with Earth. And even the Remar, a warlike species who had previously seen humans as nothing more than an obstacle to their conquests. The galaxy was filled with a host of species, each with their own agendas, but one thing was clear: if humanity could convince just a few of them to join the fight, they might stand a chance against the Council's might. Days passed, and the crew of the Resolute watched as their communications channels buzzed with responses from the colonies. The message was clear. Some species were willing to consider an alliance, others were still unsure, and some outright rejected the idea of cooperating with humanity. But there was a spark of hope. The first to respond were the Nyarlath, a race of large, intimidating mercenaries known for their brutal tactics. To many, they were no more than pirates, but they had also shown a keen interest in disrupting the Council's domination of the galaxy. Their leader, a hulking figure known as Commander Zorak, agreed to meet with Sarah, but only under one condition: he would not fight for free. "We are mercenaries," Zorak growled, his image appearing on the Resolute's communication screen. "If you want our help, you must pay for it. War is expensive, and we are not here to throw away our ships and men without compensation." Sarah was no fool. She knew the Narlac's reputation. But in this moment, she also knew that she couldn't afford to reject their offer. "Name your price," she replied. Zorek's face twisted into something between a smile and a snarl. "The price is simple, Captain Thompson. When the war is won, you will give us free passage through the Outer Rim and a percentage of your resources. We'll also take control of some of the territories you currently hold." It was a steep price, but Sarah didn't hesitate. If it meant securing the firepower humanity needed to survive, she would accept. "We have a deal," she said. The next species to respond were the Korashi, a race of tall, silver-skinned beings with advanced technology. They had long maintained neutrality in galactic conflicts, but had expressed growing concern over the increasing militarization of the Council. Their leader, High Chancellor Tessa, was cautious in her words, but ultimately agreed to aid humanity, though only under very specific terms. The moment had come. The alliance of humanity's forces, bolstered by the Narlac, the Korashi, and the Remar, was assembled at the edge of Earth's system. They were ready to take the final step in their fight against the Galactic Council. The combined fleet was massive, and for the first time, Earth's defenders had the power to match their enemies. But despite the unity they had forged, a sense of tension lingered in the air. The fate of the galaxy was hanging in the balance. Captain Sarah Thompson stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking at the enemy fleet that had appeared on their radar. The Council's armada had arrived in full force, a nearly uncountable number of warships. It was the moment of truth. The ships they faced were far superior in number and technology, but humanity's will to fight was undeniable. "We've come a long way," Sarah said, her voice steady as she turned to face her crew. "The galaxy is watching. But more importantly, Earth is watching. We stand here today because we refuse to be silenced. We refuse to bow to their tyranny. This is our fight, and we will win." Lieutenant Kara, standing at Sarah's side, nodded, her face set in determination. "It's not just Earth's fight anymore. It's the fight for freedom, for every species under the Council's rule." The ship's crew, hardened by the battles they'd already fought, stood ready. But even as Sarah spoke, the quiet hum of anticipation in the room was palpable. They had all faced death before, but today, the stakes felt even higher. Out in space, the enemy fleet loomed, their weapon systems charging. At the front, Falrex, the leader of the Council, stood aboard his flagship, the Imperious, gazing toward Earth. He had underestimated humanity from the start. Now, it was clear that the humans, along with their new allies, would not be easily defeated. And that realization burned in his mind. "We've given them every chance to submit," Falrex said, his voice cold, echoing through the vast war room aboard the Imperious. "Now, we end this." He turned to his generals, his eyes filled with a hard resolve. "Prepare the fleet for immediate assault. We end their rebellion here and now." As the orders were given, the enemy forces moved forward with precision. Massive ships, each capable of wiping out entire fleets with a single strike, began to close in on Earth's position. The battlefield stretched across the stars, and it seemed like the war would never end. On Earth, the defense fleets had gathered, ready to defend their homeworld. From the Resolute's command center, Sarah's voice rang out, loud and clear. "All fleets, move to position. Target the Council's flagship first. We take them down, and the rest will fall." A deep guttural roar echoed from the Remar fleet as their ship surged forward, cutting a path through the darkness of space. The Korashi ships activated their advanced weaponry, sending beams of energy toward the Council's fleet. Meanwhile, the Narlac mercenaries launched their fighters, circling the enemy ships like predators stalking their prey. The battle erupted into chaos. The Resolute fired its weapons, sending powerful blasts into the heart of the Council's armada. Despite being outnumbered, humanity's ships fought with a fury no one had ever anticipated. Plasma fire illuminated the darkness of space, ships exploding in brilliant bursts of light. The enemy fought back fiercely, but they were not prepared for the unexpected ferocity of Earth's united front. As the battle raged, Sarah's focus never wavered. She watched the energy readings closely, her mind calculating the enemy's movements. The Council's fleet was powerful, but they had underestimated one crucial element: human ingenuity. "Target the flagship," Sarah ordered. "Now is our chance." The Resolute's weapons locked onto the Imperius. A concentrated burst of fire tore through the darkness, striking the Council flagship with devastating force. The massive ship shuddered as explosions rocked its hull, the once imposing symbol of the Council's power now vulnerable. Falrex, standing at the helm, staggered from the impact, his eyes widening in disbelief. How could they do this?" Falrex muttered, his hand trembling as he issued orders to retaliate. But it was too late. The tide had turned.